rise and join me in the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join in a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Please be seated. And remember to silence your cell phones if you have them. For the public's information, Mr. Nelson is still occupied upstairs at a LEC closed session meeting. Mr. Taylor is also not participating, but he may be calling in at a later time, from what I understand. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I'll move it. Second by Radig. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, say nay. Passes 3-0. Items 2 through 6 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 2 is approval of the minutes of the October 17th meeting. Item 3 is approval of the claims. Item 4 from Human Resources is the approval of memorandum of personnel transactions. 5 from Board Administration is approval of funds for the holiday luncheon on Tuesday, December 5th, 2023. Item 6 from the County Treasurer includes several items, starting with A, approval of resolution for abatement of taxes for Lake Forest MHC LLC mobile home, VIN number 1644K. B is the same for VIN number 7697. C is approval of resolution for abatement of taxes for Dream Homes LLC mobile home VIN number 38A12696. Item D is approval of the same for VIN number 045-10668D. E is approval of the same for VIN number VNEB59A23448S. F is approval of the same for VIN number 0525385783. G is approval of the same for VIN number 503-00282D. H is approval to lift the tax suspension for initials PC. I is to approve the property tax refund request for parcel ending in 1004 in the amount of $1,806. J is approval of the same, but for parcel ending in 3015 in the amount of $379.50. I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
Second by Radig. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. Passes 3-0. Item 7 from Human Resources is approval to increase the employee contribution of the PPO medical plan by 3%.
Melissa Thomas, Human Resource Director. This agenda item, due to the rising cost of healthcare, will increase the PPO plan employee portion by 3%. This matches the 3% that the county increased last July 1st.
I'll move it. Second.
Motion by Radig, second by Bittinger. Hearing no other questions. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 8 from Building Services, from Kenny Schmitz and Conservation, Mr. Dan Heisel. It includes A, approval of 2024 CIP 1600-24- foundation and expenditures in the amount of $100,000.
Kenny Schmitz, Building Services Director. This agenda item is a follow-up from last week where we discussed the building floor slab settlements and foundation issues out at Dorothy Pico Nature Center. Today we come back and ask for approval for those 2024 CIP expenses. We had I have two motions before you. One is to approve the 2024 CIP 1600-24 foundation in the amount of $100,000. The second motion is an additional $25,000 funds for architectural, engineering, and geotechnical exploration expenses that have already been incurred. I'd looked at Dennis quickly to get the board's approval on where the additional $25,000 may come from, or get some input on that. And then some additional comments from Dan Heisel with Conservation for his input.
I support everything this man is doing out there with us. No, it's been a long haul and working with, coordinating everybody, but I appreciate Kenny working with us on this, and I support, of course, I approved everything that he's doing with this, and appreciate the board's support in figuring this problem out, and hopefully we can get it stabilized and move forward and get it fixed and stabilized. And I think there's a monitoring plan in place that we're gonna monitor it for 9 to 12 months to make sure there's no more shifting of the foundation, so.
Yep, and that's one of the reasons we came to the board last week, is I had expensed some pretty good sized expenditures, again, almost $25,000 we incurred, and we need to do some additional exploration and some additional work, and to keep moving forward, I think we need to approve the CIP funds, so.
I'll move 8A.
Second. Motion by Raddick, second by Bittinger. Hearing no other questions.
Well, I guess in general, this is just all CIP county funds. Is there anything from conservation on the building side, or is the building is counties, right?
Buildings, counties, yes.
Yep. I was just clarifying, so.
Most of our CIP funds, as you know, are tied up to repay the loan that we took for you to do the road, so.
Yep.
Did you have something?
We've been picking up little things here and there, so.
The CIP funds, we are classifying as a CIP 24, but we will not be borrowing for this money because we are going to use funds we had left over in 21 to get those funds all expended to stay within the period of time we're supposed to spend them.
Should it say that in the motion?
Yeah, I can. We're using up CIP 21 cash that wasn't spent for projects, or the projects were overestimated, we had money left over, so that's fine. Using CIP 21 cash to pay for the CIP 24.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 3-0. Item B is approval of additional funds of $25,000 applicable to architectural, engineering, and geotechnical expenses previously incurred.
And where was this coming from?
Same place.
Same place.
I added them together, 125, so we have money there.
Sounds good. I'll go ahead and move that.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Bittinger. Hearing no other discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 3-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 9 from the LEC Authority and Baker Group. For information, this is information on the LEC lease agreement, maintenance and improvement fund, and LEC operating expenditures. This is requested by the board, in particular, Mr. Taylor, and just for the public's information, I don't believe this could have been easily rescheduled to fit the board's, some member of the board's schedule. So there's some travel involved. Is that correct? So go ahead.
I'm sorry that it's, the LEC authorities in closed session, so they're not able to,
Yeah,
of
is
course, be here. And we do have Kevin Rost here, who can answer some questions. We also have Dale Drent here. Last week, I presented some information on budget and maintenance funds. Dale Drent with the Baker Group originally helped me do some budget estimations. That's part of where that came from. Last week, the information I presented was updated, somewhat updated figures from some information Dale had provided a long time ago when I was trying to do some budget guesstimations, if you will. Dale is here tonight, who will try to help explain how some of those figures were derived at. Again, he's got those handouts that were in your backup material last week, but he'll hand those out again. And Dale, if you would come up, I'll look to the board to ask any questions you might have of Dale or of GGA. And if you have any other questions, I'll try to certainly chime in and answer those.
I think we've received these previously.
We have.
You got it? Okay. Thank you.
Set one up here after that.
Yeah, so like Kenny mentioned, helped prepare these documents. Started looking through some of my notes earlier tonight. We started back in, like fall of 2020. Just the concepts of the new building, what's going to be built, what are all the components of the building, what's the size of the building, and really a goal to help the authority become prepared for financially understanding the life of the building. What are some of the operations costs, utilities, some of the natural things that you think about when operating a building. Utilities is, gas and electric is the easiest thing, the most tangible thing that everybody can relate to. But there's all sorts of other expenses related to operating a facility like this. So I spent a lot of time gathering that information, and there's kind of two chapters to the story, if you will. One is the operations budget, which is the ongoing expenses that happen every year. And then the other is some of the long-term capital planning. And so the graph that's kind of green in color represents, there's a 100% chance that these numbers are wrong. There's also a 100% chance that the magnitude is correct. And so what we did is really do a projection to the year 2062 and project out, financially, what does it look like to own a facility of this size and some of the components that are in it. A lot of times we see a building owner get used to the operations budget, basically funding the first 5 of the years of the building. Systems are new, you're not doing upgrades, and you kind of get used to that as being the number that it's going to take to run the facility. And then a decade into it, you start seeing some of those system replacements or upgrades, cameras, some of the software side of things now that exist that didn't exist, when this facility here, for instance, was built. And so really the goal of this was to help, working with Kenny, help the county and the authority understand financially what was on the horizon. And so this is really just a data point. Be happy to answer any sort of questions. It's just a real high level bit of information.
Dale, I'm going to interrupt just for one quick second, and this is probably my fault, but would you introduce to the group what it is actually that you really do, so they have a background that you're just not a novice coming in and
Sure.
and throwing figures together?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep, certainly. So Dale Durant, my background, mechanical engineering, is licensed engineer in the state of Iowa. I'm the head of our service group. We have about 100 employees within our service group at Baker Group that help operate buildings. We help build buildings, and then we also help from a staffing standpoint if a building owner needs some staffing, routine maintenance for specialized systems to be able to provide that to help a building owner run those. And so one of the things we do in that process as we're handing a building over to an owner done with constructing it, if they don't have their own in-house abilities to create the operations budget, we've got a lot of databases that we can use to say from a square footage. A lot of the language we use or the benchmark that we use, the units of measure is really dollars per square foot. Utilities, in the Midwest, utilities, gas and electric. Electric is pretty stable from a cost per square foot standpoint. Gas is a lot more volatile, which is fine. But understanding that, and then also the systems, is it a hospital, energy intensity? Restaurant is super intense on energy. A hospital is super intense on energy. A warehouse, for instance, is pretty low from energy intensity standpoint. So it's a lot of those line items that we have expertise in that we can help a building owner put together kind of a best guess operations budget. So that's the operations side of it. And then as we maintain systems, which systems last longer? What is the normal life expectancy? And then having a lens on what did it cost to install it? And if that system lasts 20 years, 20 years down the road, financially, what are you going to need to invest to upgrade that system? and putting that into, just an Excel spreadsheet really is all it is, but organizing the data and putting together some graphs that visually help you understand, hey, at year 2037, approximately what is that going to look like? And to be able to plan financially 3 to 5 years out. What are you going to do? What things couldn't we expect? And so my role at Baker Group is vice president of our service group. That's kind of my background and what I do. I've ran our service group for right at about 15 years now. So I've seen a lot of buildings turned over to owners and observed things that work and don't work when it comes to successfully owning a building. The cheapest way to own a building long term is to do all the routine maintenance. The clever little dental saying is you don't have to brush all your teeth, just the ones you want to keep. And so there's a lot of that in it as it relates to building maintenance. Building maintenance isn't as exciting and glamorous as new construction stuff, but getting the full life out of a building, the cheapest way to own a building long term is to maintain all the systems that are in it. And instead of getting 20 years out of them, you get 25 years. So your annual cost of ownership is less if you're maintaining. You can also, if you do no maintenance whatsoever, a 20-year system, you'll get 15 years out of it. So you're having to replace that system earlier. So our goal is to help clients understand and help budget and understand financially what that takes to make a building run properly. So, any questions?
So in this maintenance fund, are we also funding the annual operations, or is that separate? So our annual maintenance operations, like,
That's separate.
okay,
That's, if I may, the one question I have here, normally you'd have your operational, there's no other cost, capital cost. If you draw that line straight across, what are these costs that are above this line for each one of these years?
Yeah.
That's what'd be nice to identify, that way,
Yep.
is 8 million enough, or do we need 20 million, or do we need 2 million?
Yeah. And so
Above the line there.
yeah, when I printed out the physical copy of this, I shortened, there's a bunch of cells in the electronic copy that I had sent Kenny, and it shows all that information. And it identifies, the major systems I have, we'll pick on, if we look at this second sheet that's behind that green colored graph. I worked with Shane to understand the project cost to install each one of those major building components. And then we assign a life expectancy, normal life expectancy. And so if we pick on, let's just pick on, fire suppression, for instance, division number 21. So the identifiers on the left, on the far left column there is that basically line up with the specification section. So fire suppression system, there's several different components obviously that make that up entirely. And if we take a look at that, standard life expectancy of 15 years, the original cost to install that as part of the project, call it $625,000. So I've used 3% annual inflation, and if we have a 15-year life to that system, basically what it does, Dennis, is project out into the year that's going to happen, and then all the different building components that need to happen in a particular year, get fed into this spreadsheet. And again, this is a working document that I've sent to Kenny, and you guys can use this as a tool to do some planning, but this is really kind of a starter kit, so to speak, for the major components of the building.
So, can I ask another
Does
question?
that make sense?
Yeah, so say we take number 11, equipment. In 2037, which is before the 20 years is up, you're estimating 10,393,000. Our maintenance fund, 8.2 million, won't even begin to cover that. So then the county's gonna have to come up with the money. You go through each one of these years here, you go to 2037, there's 623,000 fire suppression. 2041 is when they'll turn the building over to the county. That's when the bonds are paid off. So you need to look at everything before 2041, a potential expense we're gonna have. And we start looking at that, the $8 million threshold isn't enough to cover what we got, so they can't reduce the 8 million. If anything, we should increase it. But we just hope to goodness none of these really hit full bore like you have estimated here, or we got a serious problem because we can't come back to the county fund it because we'll have to go back to vote of the people if it's over $1.5 million. You can look at these here, there's several over $1.5 million. So that's why I'm just trying to make a case to leave the maintenance fund where it's at, because here's documentation of when these could go out in what year. Yeah, we don't have to do them, but are we jeopardizing the stability of that building? That's my comment.
Yeah, and the goal of putting this together really is to drive those kinds of conversations. This is, again, I said a little bit ago, there's a 100% chance that these numbers are wrong, but there's a 100% chance the magnitude is correct. And so the closer you get to a particular milestone or a particular year, the more clear that gets on exactly what that is. And you can get updated pricing on that building component, whatever that is, and put together a maintenance plan to say, hey, how do we get more life out of this thing, whatever this thing is, whether it's masonry, tuck pointing, all those things that it takes to run a building. There's a standard operating cost. And again, what I see a lot happen is everybody gets used to that. Here's our operations budget. And then the first time you have a large capital expenditure, there's no funds available. And so the goal is to help the authority and the county understand the magnitude of some of that stuff, so that when the time comes for some of those upgrades, those funds are available in whatever, the mechanism or the mechanics of how you do that here in this part of the state obviously is up to you guys. But my hope and dream in this exercise is to help you financially do some planning and understand how to make that happen, make sure those funds are there when they're needed. Because we see it a lot where when organizations, whether it's the private or public sector, they get used to the operations budget, the funds aren't there to make a replacement, and then the system is broken and it doesn't get repaired. And so some of those are life safety systems. Those are easy to get funds for, but usually you're having a high stress situation. We're pulling funds from this bucket that were intended for that. We're having to use it for this life safety system. And so again, my hope and dream is that for this facility, you've got this planned out well in advance so that doesn't happen at that time.
In your estimation, what would you say is the number one thing to plan for financially in the first 10 years versus the second 10 years?
That's a hard question to answer. There's so many different, we'll pick on HVAC systems as a for instance. Within the HVAC systems that are in that building, some of those components last 25 years, some of them have a normal life of 15. So it's not really the first 10-year milestone, it's these things. The next 10-year milestone is these things. There's roofing components, roofing membranes, and all that stuff kind of fit certainly within that 10-year window of at least having somebody come, the roofing company come once a year and just do an inspection and identify, catch leaks before they happen and cause internal damage. Having a routine annual discipline to do that. But that 10-year milestone, again, it's a lot of different building components. Camera systems for sure have kind of that life. And some of those, the systems, we'll pick on cameras as a for instance, the cameras still function, but the resolution, the technology that develops in that particular industry, you may say, hey, 5 years into this, these systems still work, but we need to upgrade because of image quality or storage capacity or something along those lines. So the technology components, I guess, to kind of get back to your question, a lot of the technology components that are in that facility would be probably within the first 10 years would need some financial commitment of some sort. And I would, as an authority or as a county, I would lean pretty heavy on the technology vendors in that arena to say, hey, and have a separate meeting outside of a county board of supervisors meeting, have a separate meeting with some of those vendors or some of that technology groups and create a separate almost committee if needed to identify what is the lifespan of this thing and get it dialed in a little bit tighter.
Do we have any insight on Mr. Raddick's question from the authority as far as the operating versus capital expenditures?
We've already approved that operating with Kenny's budget, right?
Okay.
Yes, we approved a 24 operating budget. It didn't necessarily follow what you have for background of figures here, but we did approve a budget, yes.
Because you did work with him to get your numbers, correct?
Yes, yep, that was part of this, yes. we'll see how it plays out, because it's, you know, it's not certain science for sure, but every building reacts differently. You know, you can build two identical buildings and place them in two different places, and they'll do two different things. But with that said, we based it off of the best figures we know how to estimate on, so, yeah.
Okay.
So I guess, you know, my point from last week, I think it's still the same point I'd like to make, is that if we're gonna levy $400,000 a year for building maintenance, I'd like it to be in kind of a general building maintenance fund then, where we can use it for any county building, rather than the one building that can actually borrow because it has a revenue source that you can abate the bonds with. So that's, I think, something that would make more sense from a county standpoint.
I think if we were starting fresh, that would certainly be what we would do, but there are existing agreements to consider, and that's part of the process here. Questions from board members?
Okay, thank you. In the if you need me as a resource in the future, you know, I can certainly come over for future board meetings, and I'll kind of use Shane as my gatekeeper, so to speak, on how to get a hold of me and let me know when those are needed, or if it's a meeting outside the board meeting, certainly available as a resource to help with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Was there anything else in the LSC authority you wanted to add, or are we good? Okay. Thank you. Item 10 from the Board of Supervisors, Mr. Taylor and Mr. Radig. This is information related to actions taken by the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors related to the Law Enforcement Center and the engagement of legal services by the LAC Authority. Mr. Radig.
And I'd probably maybe title that differently, but you know, you can tell by the backup material, I didn't write all that. I'm a little more brief than that. But in discussions that, you know, that we've had here over the last few weeks, we've talked about maybe the need for the county to have its own legal representation. And I still kind of think, you know, yeah, we're the same team as the LEC, but at the same time, we're different entities. We are kind of separate in a lot of ways. And I think it might make more sense if we had our own representation. So I guess that's why it's on here as information and likely to come back next week, so.
Any other comments?
Sorry I was late getting down here. We were in a closed session with the LEC. Have been in a lot of conversations with the LEC's attorney in the last week. We've had some closed sessions, and I don't have any problem at all with the Board of Supervisors getting outside counsel. I think that potentially there's going to be work for the board to do and separate from the LEC. I think that talking with Attorney James Loomis and our Attorney Joshua Widman down there, that this is, you know, something that's maybe out of their comfort zone as far as a project of this size, getting involved litigating that, and they've been very helpful so far. But I think to protect ourselves and our citizens and look out for this project, I don't think that it's us versus them with the authority, and I think that we could find someone that the authority's attorney and the county's attorney can work well with each other, and we'll try to get this streamlined as best as possible. James, if you want to come up and say something to that effect too.
Good evening, gentlemen. James Loomis, Woodbury County Attorney. I had a number of discussions with Jody regarding this particular issue and the county having representation. And my discussions and Mr. Widman's discussions with her, she's decided it's best at this point that she just represent one entity and the county look for outside counsel. I'm in agreement with that based on kind of everything that's developed probably over the last few weeks in terms of discussion by the different board members and what their thoughts have been and what their wishes are. I would express to the board that from my perspective, neither myself or Mr. Widman have the expertise within our office to handle this kind of situation, this kind of potential litigation that is involved, nor do I have the resource or time or staffing just generally. You all know the staffing situation that my office is facing. So it is best for the county to look to hire outside counsel to represent the county. I do believe that generally speaking, the interests align, that of the county and the LAC authority and even the Baker Group, and that's just my opinion. I do think that the interests align a lot and what the efforts would be jointly, and I think that whoever the board determines should be hired would be working closely in conjunction with Jody on that effort in representing the interests of the county. At this point in time, I know that Mr. Taylor has provided at least one attorney to potentially represent the county. I'm certainly looking at a couple different recommendations that the board could consider, and I suppose that I would make those recommendations at a later time when the board decides to take action on that. I know it's just an informational meeting for purposes of tonight, but when the board decides to take action on that and make the decision to hire outside counsel again, I would advise the board to do so. I would want a consensus of the board members and the board to be in agreement as to who that counsel is. I think what's developed over the past few weeks is that this board as a body needs to be in unison with each other. You need to be able to work with whomever that attorney is together. There cannot be disagreement by the board. There may be disagreements as to certain things, but there needs to be a trust relationship by this body with whoever that attorney is. And so if there are any recommendations that you as a board want to send to myself or Mr. Widman to look at, again, I know Mr. Taylor has sent that. Jody has recommended a couple folks as well. So my process would be to just kind of look into that. I can make a recommendation to the board if they would want that in terms of who I think it would be appropriate, and then the board can make that decision. But I would want whoever that person is that it would be 5-0 in terms of this is the person that we're going with, not 4-1, not 3-2, 5-0, so that everyone is understanding and is on the same page. This is how we're going to move forward so that we can best represent the interests of the county as a unified front, so to speak. So I hope that all kind of addresses both the position of my office and what I think would be necessary moving forward. In terms of a timetable, I would defer to the board in terms of when they want to take action, whether it's you, Mr. Raddick, or Mr. Taylor, or even Mr. Unn as chair, for putting that as an action item on the meeting. I would intend to address that when it comes up. If it is next Tuesday when that comes up, it's unlikely that I would be here for that. I start a murder trial on Tuesday next week, and that's consuming a lot of my time. Mr. Widman would be here, and I would have discussions with him on the different options that are available to of who would represent the county, so he could certainly represent the office as he does on a weekly basis and kind of present that information to the board should there be any questions. So that's kind of where my office is at this point in time. Be happy to address any other questions, comments, concerns regarding outside counsel at this point. But again, if it does come up next week, I likely wouldn't be here. I would defer to Mr. Widman to kind of advise the board on that and for the board to take action accordingly if that's when it happens.
And just to clarify, for the public, Jody that you referenced that gave you some recommendations is Jody McDougall from Frederickson Bryan, who is currently representing the Law Enforcement Center Authority. for
Yes,
those
that is
following.
correct, Mr. Nelson. Yes, thank you for clarifying.
I would say, James, I would like some recommendations from you, who, you know, I'd like to see that, since that's your field and expertise too. Any, you know, who would you recommend, or if there's a couple candidates, you know, you think would work well?
Sure, and again, I've been given a couple recommendations through Mr. Taylor and through Jody, and so kind of vetting those
yeah.
those different options to see probably who would be the best fit to represent the county, and we can kind of bring that before the board when the time is appropriate. But I would certainly, either myself or Mr. Widman would be in a position to kind of at least give some insight or opinion as to
Right.
who we think would be best suited for that role.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And, and I would personally really appreciate your input and recommendation, if you have one. And I know Mark's mentioned that before too, that, you know, now that the board is looking for counsel, to rely on your office so that there's at least a minimum standard imposed. And I know you've been a part of discussions with the LAC's authority attorney, and so that can at least inform, you know, your perspective to us. Because, again, you know, now that we've taken this, or now that this step has been taken, cooperation is going to be absolutely essential between the legal counsels, especially in regards to, and mainly in regards to, which was my point last week, the recuperation of the funds that the county's lost consequentially due to the actions of other parties, plural. And so this does add, unfortunately, another layer of complexity and cost, and not only that, but staff time. We'll have to work with two different entities, but eventually it may have been that this would be inevitable, but I don't think that waiting at least until this point was a bad idea, because there's a lot of background work that's going to need to be done. And at least until this point, we benefited from that cohesion and those closed sessions. So I hope that this does not cause a break in those joint closed sessions, or at least a break in and I'm getting the no from the LAC Authority Chair, so that's good, or, you know, a break in any communication between the entities, so.
And I'd be happy to give you the best wisdom I can give you, Chairman Unn, when the time comes. And so again, like I said to Mr. Bittinger, that I'll do my best to kind of look through the different options that are available to represent the county, and either myself or Mr. Widman can relay our thoughts on who those folks are. Anything else, gentlemen? All right. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Anything else, Mr. Radig? Any other comments from board members? Hearing none, we'll move on to our last item for myself. This is for information. This is a public statement regarding Navigator's Pipeline and the Woodbury County Board's advocacy on behalf of its taxpayers. I think we've had a lot of discussion, certainly from the public, and targeted requests of the county to take action, and we've certainly heard that. We've certainly looked upon these projects with skepticism and a healthy sense of desire to protect our landowners and their property rights. So I just wanted to use this opportunity to remind everyone that the county board has taken steps over the years, and this is good news from my perspective, and I think I'm getting some nods. So Navigator Heartland Greenway LLC has canceled their 1,300-mile hazardous liquid CO2 pipeline. This is great news for our landowners who are most concerned about eminent domain being used against them improperly, especially those along the proposed route near Lawton and Sergeant Bluff. These are private projects that almost everyone except the Iowa Governor's Office seem to realize are not real public utilities. We applaud the legal processes and citizen engagement that brought about this resolution. Granting eminent domain for private companies sets a dangerous precedent. I took that line from the draft of the City Council's resolution, which they declined to vote on the other week. On January 11th, 2022, the Woodbury County Board sent a letter to the Iowa Utilities Board that said in part, quote, "This board, as the undersigned, having been elected to represent the county residents and taxpayers, do hereby support them in their efforts to resist the pipelines proposed and ask the Iowa Utilities Board to deny any and all permits and/or eminent domain declarations against the landowners in Woodbury County," end quote. On May 25th, 2023, the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors filed a petition to intervene with the Iowa Utilities Board. In our petition, we asserted Iowa Code Section 331.301 grants the authority to, quote, "exercise any power and perform any function it deems appropriate to protect and preserve the rights, privileges, and property of the county or of its residents, and to preserve and improve the peace, safety, health, welfare, comfort, and convenience of its residents," end quote. And then on July 18th, 2023, the Woodbury County Board approved a resolution asserting, quote, "an absolute right for private property land rights with a rejection of the use of eminent domain to force landowners to place pipelines, turbines, solar projects, or solar panels, or any other energy commodity on their land against their will and consent," end quote. I don't think this board can take unilateral credit for this news development, but certainly being one of the largest counties or the largest county to intervene in the two dockets carries some weight. And I think, having that council present in those meetings and representing landowners and organizing those arguments on behalf of our county, at least in regards to the impact of the route upon county residents, has been immensely useful. And so again, just to repeat, we applaud the legal process and legal citizen engagement that brought about this resolution. So I understand a lot of this has been taken over, so to speak, by the other project, and I think they pushed out their timeline, and this is going to be a long road. But on the bright side, it does give the Iowa legislature another chance to do the right thing if the project is put out there longer on the calendar. So, any other follow-up from board members? We've all done this already, so we know what.
I would just like to
position is.
second the comment you just made about the citizens' involvement, whether you two ladies come into countless board meetings, and Doyle too. When I went to Fort Dodge to the Midwest Coalition to Support Property Rights, that whole thing was overrun with Woodbury County residents involved, and then listening to all the IUB hearings with, I know it's Summit, which they're still proceeding, it's not Navigator, but when you listen to those IUB hearings and you've got all these Woodbury County residents that have taken the time to go to Fort Dodge, to testify, to be there, that's significant. So I applaud all three of you sitting there and everybody else that's not here tonight for your guys' efforts, and we thank you for coming here to share information with us, because we can't help you in this fight unless we know the information, and that comes from you guys, so thank you.
Thank you. Good. Good.
Doyle Turner, 2738 200th Street, Mobile. And I just want to say thank you to you guys. I know there was a lot of good debate and back and forth, and it's really, you have to remember, it was uncharted territory that we were really in. And I am proud when I go meet in other counties to say that Woodbury stepped up and took a proactive role. And the role that you took played a big part in what happened. It really did. The other thing that needs to be said is I was at the meeting in Pierre when they shut down Summit, and what shut that pipeline, both pipelines down up there, were the counties. Now, I realize Iowa law and South Dakota law aren't exactly the same. However, everyone was telling the counties in South Dakota, guess what? You have no say. Well, guess what? They did. Now, our IUB is different than their Public Utility Commission. However, when you get in a courtroom, who knows where this is going to go. We had a small setback with Timothy Whipple's case, but it is by far not done. But we also need to go to Des Moines and get some of these laws changed, because private companies should not be able to do eminent domain. It's really that simple. And the local government knows their territory better than everybody else, and I think you stepped up and proved that you're more capable of making decisions than they are in DC and in Des Moines. I just want to say thank you.
Appreciate it. Anything else on this item?
The only thing, Chairman, I'll bring up to Doyle's point is going to Des Moines. I went twice in the spring session and talked with legislators, and a lot of them, well, surprisingly acted like they were unaware that people didn't want the pipelines. And I didn't know what to take that tongue in cheek or how to react to that, but I was encouraged just citizens, elected officials to go to Des Moines, meet with them. And I think Doyle, you are correct. And we have to go there because there is a growing encroachment of federalism and centralized control over home rule. So I plan on, once the legislature starts open this year, I'm going to go at least 4 or 5 times and just meet with legislators to bring up this and other topics as well. So I would just encourage citizens and anyone, elected officials, to go to Des Moines. That's realistically, emails are great. Then what we did, I think, was great, sending emails and petitioning, but the one FaceTime really does hold a lot more weight. And the legislators I talked to about this issue, they were very thankful and very amazed that county supervisor would take their time to come to Des Moines to talk to them. So I think there's something there we can use in the future to help communicate what we need in Woodbury County. So that's it. That's all that I have.
Yeah, and I'm more confident in what Woodbury County's done on this front, also just from being in that roundtable meeting with legislators. I'm glad so many of them did attend. But going into it, I kind of thought, as county supervisors, we would go in with our opinion, and we would get, I don't want to say rebuffed, but we'd get all this context, and what you don't understand is this, and this is the way it works, and this is how. But on this topic, it really just came down to, well, the leadership or the caucus hasn't put it up for a vote or things like that, and it just made me think, well, we're the representatives here.
You bring up a interesting point there, Dan, that when you go down to Des Moines and you stand in the Capitol and where they basically make the sausage, it's, if you go to the room between the House and the Senate and you stand in there and you see during the breaks and everybody comes out, there's usually just one group of people in there waiting to bend the ear of your legislators, and it's the lobbyists. And very few people that work 9 to 5 can ever make it down there and actually voice their opinion.
True.
So they're only getting one side of the story ever. So yeah, when you say people don't want this, it's probably, the first time they've ever heard it, because the only information they're gonna get is from the lobbyist that says, hey, we got this great deal, everybody loves it, So it's a different world, and you see the isolation down there that they vote in, so they get their news from their different periodicals that they read and from the lobbyists that talk to them in the lobby. And, it's good to have like our chamber day where we go down there, or like, you made your own special occasion to go down there, and really, citizen involvement on this is what changed it more than anything, any of us did up here, because, I've never gotten 30 emails a day, for months on end on any other subject. So it's pretty interesting to have seen. But you know, I want to applaud those people that did get involved, did take the time, because that's part of democracy and making things work is getting out there and being that communication rather than just the lobbyists.
And I really like that we brought our, department heads into the mix as well, because they really have the information that might not be received by a legislator unless we introduce them as during the roundtable or in the future and just make that connection. So, great. Hearing nothing else on this item. Move on to item 12, reports on committee meetings.
I'll start. I just had the WCICC meeting. Nothing new to report other than employees are getting better about not clicking on spam. And some of the testing just to making sure. I mean, it's better, yeah. I see most. It's getting better. It's not great, but we're doing there. We're getting there. But I will say on the county side, it's better. So the county's doing well.
The county's consistently outperformed the city.
Yes, the county is
on
doing
that.
well. Our county employees are top notch. So they're top notch and they're smart cookies, as my grandmother would say. But no, hats off to the whole team there, John Malloy and all his team once again. They're doing a lot of things. And John's doing a great job. They're helping us save some money, rearranging some things in the budget. So I'm just glad to have those leaders in place that are helping us with our taxpayers' dollars and making sure we're being spending those effectively. And then just the planning and zoning last night was open session too, talking about solar panels, and it was good to have citizen input there again. And appreciate all the planning and zoning members and their hard work and the work sessions they're putting into dealing with this solar zoning. So that's all that I have.
Couple things here. Western Iowa Tourism has a travel guide that they print. It usually comes out kind of late winter, and they highlight events from our region, Western Iowa, but not only events, but businesses, those sort of things. And they have these guides available for free at various businesses, lodging locations, that sort of thing. And so the deadline to get your information is January 26th, so we've got plenty of time. But I think a lot of people think like, well, I have, say, an event like Made and Found in Anthon, or maybe an event like Art Splash, where it's not a hotel, it's not a business. No, they want to know events, community events, whatever. If it's a gathering that people may want to travel and see, they want to know about it. So if you have any questions in that regard, contact me, or we can get a hold of Western Iowa Tourism for that travel guide. Secondly, from Western Iowa Tourism, I was on their website, and they have a tourism grant that they give out. Well, they give out multiple grants every year, but right now you can get on and see the rubric and that sort of thing that they used this year, and be thinking about it for next year. The applications are usually due in August, and so it's not a bad time. We've got some time here as we're heading into the winter. But you guys will have some downtime. Feel free to go to Travel Iowa and look at that grant. They get, it's significant money, and I think it's well worth looking at that rubric and see what qualifications if you can apply. So, any questions, you can contact me about that too. I had a conservation board meeting Thursday night out at Bigelow Park. That was part of the department head appreciation picnic. They had many of our county employees, and I know Supervisor Taylor was out there, and Karen and Heather and Joshua was out there, and so it was great to have a bunch of people from the county there. They did a tour of the new concession stand and beach and everything that they have out there, which that park is great. It was fun to see all the people camping. It was a beautiful night, and it was fun to mingle with our county employees and those on the conservation board, that sort of thing. And then Saturday night was the annual trick or treat at Little Sioux Park, and so my wife and kids we made the long trip over there for that. And every campsite was sold out. The event went from 5 to 6:30. We got there about 20 after 5, and right off the cuff we ran into one of the conservation officers there who was handing out candy, and he was already out of candy, and he had bought 500 pieces and had only been given one per kid. And he was out about a half hour into the event, and it went a whole nother hour. So, Dan, if you're listening, give your guys more money for candy. for next year. But seriously, it was an absolutely beautiful night, and all the people there having fun. And I know that Southwood is having their haunted trail, and maybe that was this past week. I'm sorry, I don't know the date on that, but it's fun that we've got these opportunities across the county for some of these things, and just a hats off to all the volunteers and staff that make it possible. So that's all I have.
So you put that haunted trail on your Western Iowa tourism thing for next year.
Writing that down. Thank you, Keith.
Yeah, and then that trick or treating thing too. Community Action Agency, you guys always get the minutes usually right on those. But we did have a little discussion on the Siouxland Sleep Out, which is coming up Friday, November 3rd. So if anybody wants to go camping, it, again, is about raising awareness for homelessness, which on average in Iowa, there's 8.8 homeless per 10,000 people. But I think Sioux City is probably about 5 times that, so something to just keep in mind.
And that was November when?
3rd, Friday, November 3rd. It's usually the stadium at Morningside, right? I guess I didn't get the direct location.
Explorers.
Is it Explorers? Okay, yeah, thank you.
Item 13, citizen concerns. Is there anyone to speak?
Kenny Schmidt, Building Services Director. I'm up here really speaking for Dan Heisel, who had to leave earlier. Out at Dorothy Pico Nature Center, that facility is tied into our building automation systems. And last week, my maintenance supervisor noticed something in our HVAC systems that didn't look right with Dorothy Pico Nature Center. And so I gave him a call and said, hey, take a look at your building automation systems. Our computers, they just don't look right. It looks like something's not working correctly. They're under contract, a service contract with C.W. Suter. So they contacted Suter and had him come out and take a look. And what they have is a bad JACE. What a JACE is basically a piece of equipment that's programmed with software. It interfaces between our building automation computers. That is a computer that we get on and we make adjustments and change damper settings and temperatures in different spaces and things like that. We look at fan speeds, intake air, exhaust air, all those types of things. It interfaces with those physical controls. Their JACE has stopped working. Dan called me because today earlier and said, hey, we don't have any money in our budget. We don't have a budget for this. Wanted to know if I could take it out of my budget. And I said, Dan, I don't have a operating budget for Dorothy Pico's facility. That's not one of my operating budgets. Therefore, he doesn't have any money more for candy, let alone equipment. But he has asked me to step up and say a few words under citizen concerns. He's looking for $4,423 to replace the JACE in that facility. And I don't know if Dennis has got any input or comments from the board on where Dan might be able to get that money.
Kenny, how much was that again? You said 4,000?
$4,423. That expense is just for the piece of equipment. There actually is quite a bit of labor that's attributed with that. It's programming. That is covered under their service agreement. The labor is covered.
Thank you. I think it'd be sufficient if you just want to bring that back next week, Dennis, with where we're at and what we can
Yes.
do.
It's too small really for a CIP, so probably unfortunately or fortunately, we got gaming revenues. It's a one-time expense for probably many years.
So it's not like a warranted item?
It's not a warranted item. Actually, it was replaced when we did the systems upgrade out at Dorothy Pico. That was just a little bit over 4 years ago, and it's just out of warranty. So, yeah, to your expenses on a new facility that we were talking about earlier, perfect example.
So we need one of these now for Dorothy Pico every 4 years.
We've got the template.
Yeah. 4423 times 3% per annum, so we know.
Thank you.
Color, please. Color.
Color in size 25 font, so we can read it, please.
Yeah. Any other citizen concerns? Hearing none. Item 14, any board concerns?
I have one, and this is gonna go back to committee reports, because Kenny, you made me think of it. So at the, I wanted to update you guys on Little Sioux Park with the sewer work that we're doing down there. So this was from Thursday. I apologize. I was thinking about all this other stuff. But so the engineer plans for the updated sewer for the campgrounds at Little Sioux Park are about 90% complete. They're in talks with getting their permit with the DNR. They've got to add a transformer down there to carry more power to those sites, but that's not a big deal. They're still looking at bidding it this fall and having the construction done next spring. They would like to be done by about May 15th, or for sure before Memorial Weekend, because that's a big weekend. For those keeping track, the Bellamy campground, they're going to they'll reduce the number of spots there about 10 to 15, and the Riverside Park will not be reduced. So, and the reason some of the campgrounds are being reduced is that as campers have gotten bigger, there's not enough space for them to park, so they're kind of widening the spots, and so you would just lose fewer spots. But that is the update on that. I just wanted you guys to have that.
Thank you. Hearing no other board concerns,